Why is it important to be independent? Why is it that we should strive for this evolution? Shouldn't we stay at the conformity dependence level? And I will argue, and research shows, as well as historical incidences show, that it is important to cultivate independence as a way to cultivating interdependence. First of all, because of moral behavior. If you think about it, the worst atrocities throughout history were conducted by people conforming, by obedience to authority, and by racist or ethnocentric beliefs and behaviors. Now look at these three things that obedience to authority. A person with high dependent self-esteem is much more likely to be obedient to an authority figure. Why? Because he or she seeks accolades, they seek approval, they don't feel strong enough themselves, they need that very charismatic leader to tell them, oh, you're fine, you're okay, you're superior. Because that's what their sense of self is dependent on. Because we're much more likely to conform to what a group is doing if we need constantly the accolades of that group. You think about the Milgram experiments, you think about Asch experiments. Those of you who've taken Psych 15 or Psych 1. You think about racism. What is racism? Racism is about comparison and wanting to assert superiority on the basis of some external factor. In other words, I'm not good enough as I am. In order to prove how good I am, I have to compare myself to another. And whether I choose place of residence, whether I choose upbringing, whether I choose the color of the skin. It's about relative competence. Whereas people who are independent don't have the need, or have less of that need for comparison, as well as less of that need to conform. They're true to principles, their own principles. Now, this is not a panacea. This is not always good, because I'm sure there were also Nazis who were true to their principles. But as I'll show later in research, those who are true to their principles are more likely to follow their heart. And unless their heart is damaged, and I mean that in the true sense of the word damaged, they will seek to do good. They will seek to help. Their levels of empathy will increase. And this is the paradox of empathy. It's actually when we cultivate empathy, or rather when we cultivate, for lack of a better term, and I don't actually want to use a new term, when we cultivate self-love, when we cultivate self-esteem, that's when we're most likely to be empathic and to love others. Look at the golden rule. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. What is the prerequisite of loving your neighbor? The self. You're the standard. We are the standard of how we evaluate others, because our behavior toward others very often, not always, but very often mirrors our behavior toward ourselves. So people who cultivate an independent sense of self, who have a strong self-identity, are better able to identify with others. In addition to moral behavior, better cognitive performance. You see, people who have a strong dependent self-esteem, or primarily driven by what other people say, will follow the road that has already been taken. They can potentially be great mechanics, because they'll work hard for these accolades, and that's a good thing, to work hard. But they'll basically remain within the box. Whereas people who have a stronger sense of independent self-esteem think outside the box. Choose the path that hasn't already been taken. That doesn't mean that they can't walk in the path that has been taken if that is what they really, really want to do with their lives. So, it's just as much a sign of dependence when we say, well, I'm going to do the opposite of what everyone else does, because I'm still dependent on what everyone else does. So that's not independent self-esteem. That's just more dependence. But if I sit down and I say, okay, what do I really, really want to do with my life? And I think about it, truly, put myself in a world where no one would know what I was doing, I'm much more likely to identify that thing which is my passion, my core, my calling. Be it in investment banking or working at Unilu. It doesn't matter. The question is, what is the source of that? A person with independent self-esteem is committed to continuous learning. Remember the John Cotter study, what differentiated the HBS grads, the extraordinary ones from the rest, was that they were always asking questions. They always wanted to learn more. They didn't get out of, graduate from college or graduate from business school or from a PhD program or wherever it is and say, okay, I know enough. All right, now I'm a manager, now I'm a leader. I'll tell people how they should. This is the amazing thing about Warren Bennett. He's always asking questions. He's always interested in what people are doing. He's always learning. Levels of happiness are higher, and I'll show you the research in a minute, when we experience a sense of independent self-esteem. We're much calmer when we don't constantly have to prove ourselves to others. It is enervating to constantly be on the guard. Is this person going to like me? How do I gain their validation? We're much calmer when we say, let me express myself, and yes, it may hurt me. It will hurt me if they don't like me. But that's okay. I'm resilient, I'm strong, I can deal. Much calmer sense of being when we express rather than constantly try to impress. Imagine how much lighter our lives can be if when we're here or when we walk out of here, we experience this sense of being more and more of the time. Again, not perfectly because that's not human, but more and more of the time to just be, to exist, to celebrate our existence and existence as a whole.